I've been listening to Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and something interesting occurred to me, and that's similar to meditations and other Stoic books and Stoic podcasts and ancient wisdom seems to be becoming more and more prominent now. So, my question to you is, why do you think people from this day and age in 2022 are looking so far into the past for knowledge and wisdom to make sense of the current world?
That's a good question. Yeah, first I'll just say it is pretty wild that things that were written, thousands of years ago are resonating, with our society right now like more than ever. Um, as to why that is, I mean, it's interesting. I think in a lot of ways, past eras of humans may have been a little more advanced than we are now in certain aspects. Um, like for instance, today our culture is, as far as we know, the most superior technologically. We have all these gadgets and just insane technology compared to what we know in the last thousands of years. So I think, if you look at our culture now, we're always so engaged in something like, and it's strange. We're like passively engaged, with our technology, and we're always like locked into something. We have like a short attention span. We're always watching something on the phone or the television, whatever. Point is, by doing that, we haven't done what I think a lot of advanced cultures in the past have done, which is introspect. So, like, people had a lot more time to look within in those times. I think that's why you have so much like um ancient wisdom that is just completely would resonate today. It's like they captured the human condition. Because as human beings, I don't think we've really changed that much. It's just the circumstances that have changed. So we have to remember the things that we have forgotten as a culture. Because if you think about it, the average person today, they don't spend much time in silence. That's why meditation is so hard for people. Um, Even it's crazy when you think about it. Even like just taking a shit. If you go to the bathroom and you forget your phone, you're like, "Oh, no." It's like a it's a tragedy, you know what I mean? Just to spend 10 minutes with yourself. And when you think to people of the past, they were faced with those type of situations all the time, and that's not even that far back. When we were kids, we didn't have a phone in the bathroom, but that's just, like, one small example of, how our culture today, we don't really look within to find answers. And I think that's something really important that people did in the past. There wasn't such a widespread source of information to get all the answers externally, so you had to come to your own conclusion by independently finding the answers. And so that's like the bittersweet relationship I think that we have with technology now.
And if you look at Marcus Aurelius, he was a Roman emperor, he was a leader. And we don't have any leaders in our society that are wise and carry any sort of deep wisdom. Do you think you could look to Mr. Joseph Biden for advice on how to contemplate living and dying or matters of the heart or anything that's related to, again, like you said, the human condition? Like these leaders that we've put into place now, I think directly reflect the culture in which we live. And that's a culture that's void of wisdom.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think that's right. I mean, the leaders we have are just a reflection of ourselves as a people. And we won't have a leader that's so wise because it's not something that is even valued in our culture right now. It's interesting. Like Trump is a good example that Trump got elected, I think is very telling of our society. Um, as a people, and especially like American culture, we value success, power, money. Those are the things that everybody, is kind of aiming at and trying to achieve. And Trump is like a caricature of those things. He just, puts his name up in big gold letters and, talks about being a billionaire and all this stuff. So I think that's all we're going to get until there's like a monumental shift in our priorities as a culture. It's difficult because if part of me wants to be optimistic and think, sometime soon that shift is going to be happening. But if you look at like the children today, it's the way they're coming up is very strange, with the technology and just a very just very different from what we encountered as kids. So part of me wants to be optimistic, but part of me that is trying to think logically sees this situation kind of getting worse. Um, and I think in order for the a big paradigm shift to happen in our culture, we might have to go through something horrific first.
I look at the way that kids are growing up now, and I do agree it's weird. It's definitely way different. But is that a necessary barometer to base good or bad off of? It's really hard to say when you're looking at a generation that has a trajectory that is mysterious to you, whether or not it's going to end up positively or negatively. And what I like to look back on, and this is something that I learned early from Terrence McKenna, he would say that if you look at what's happening, and you can see it in like Steven Pinker's work as well, like we are moving toward positivity and um, inclusivity more and more as the generations go on. You see, at one point, we didn't let women vote. Black people weren't free. And now, we are continuously becoming more and more humanitarian, which to me indicates like the right direction.
Yeah, I agree, and, um, I don't mean to say that it's going to be negative. Mainly what I was getting at is it doesn't seem that if I had to just predict the trajectory that what is happening will lead to the substance of those ancient wisdoms that we're talking about. So, that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Um, I'm just seeing it in a way that maybe those type those types of things aren't rewarded as much as maybe they used to be, so they're not valued as much. But at the same time, I'm not saying it's all going to just go away because ancient wisdoms that we're talking about are timeless. So it will always speak to the human condition. But the human condition is changing rapidly as far as our environment, entertainment, and culture, all that stuff. So I don't think that it's necessarily leading to something negative. I don't think that at all. But it just seems a little bit off the path.
So, do you think that the rise in the interest of ancient wisdom coinciding also with the rise of interest in psychedelics can get us to a place where we are positioning ourselves to become more wise as a culture and as a society?
I think ideally, yes, if that was the case, if we really as a culture grabbed on to those things like psychedelics and ancient wisdoms, but and that's me thinking uh optimistically. I start to think of like the opposing force that's so powerful. It's easy for me in my own mind and my perspective to see everything going great if people do what I think they should do, which is take psychedelics and, read ancient knowledge and, do everything that I'm doing for myself. So it's easy to kind of project that onto everybody else and say, if they all do this, everything is going to be great. Um, but what I see more when I step out of myself is a more powerful influence um, that is capturing a large majority of people more than psychedelics or these ancient wisdoms. So I think that the answer will lie within the technology. Everything is going to be driven by the technology, and especially if the more that AI is integrated into our everyday lives. I mean, really, who knows where it's going to go? Um, but either way, the ancient wisdoms of meditations and other things like that will always be relevant for us. I think till the end of humanity. It's that's the great thing about it. It transcends cultures and time periods. So it's always valued. I think we're valuing it now because, like I said, it's not something we're getting. But with the internet and technology, you can seek it and then you have it at your fingertips, which is great. But I think that as a culture, we are kind of starving for it because we're so void of it. Our entertainment is very kind of dull, flashy colors, money, nothing too deep that makes you think about yourself. It's what it seems like entertainment today is used to, you know, get you out of yourself so you don't have to think. And I don't think that's how it has to be. I think entertainment and culture and its role could be kind of changed to something that incorporates yourself with it rather than getting out of yourself and just observing and forgetting about your life for a while. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, that seems to be the dichotomy that we're dealing with here is like you have more access to ancient knowledge and the answers potentially to the problems of the human condition, but then you have this entertainment system that just breeds the exact opposite. But that is, I think, overall probably a good thing because it further feeds that hunger that you were talking about for these types of things. And there's a reason why reality TV is not pertinent to the human condition and timeless, whereas like Marcus Aurelius's Meditations or the Tibetan Book of the Dead is timeless, because these are things that we are going to keep coming back to as the current state of entertainment fizzles out and becomes something different based off of the current trends that advertising and product sales are driving. It seems that beneath the surface, the foundation of the human condition will always be more readily available within ancient traditions and wisdom texts.
Yep, religions as well. I totally agree with that. And I just find it interesting that culturally we just seem to be straying so far from that. And what I don't not necessarily worries me, but what makes me, question the future is, the next generation coming up. It's hard to imagine what it might look like in like 30 years when the babies today will be, the adults running the country. I think that the m- part that, worries me most is what kind of goes back to the example that I mentioned before about not having your phone on the toilet. It seems like we're getting into an area where we don't want to be human, meaning you never want to sit with yourself and just fully experience what it is to be human. And with technology, it makes it really easy to not have to do that. And with this generation of kids coming up, it's going to be like they never lived, like literally never lived without this stuff. So they don't even know what it's like to spend time with themselves. And then, I mean, a lot of people predict that, things like Neuralink are going to be popular. Like we're going to actually incorporate the technology with our bodies. So you literally cannot be without this stuff. And, that might bring something beautiful and amazing. But I think that it's very important to kind of keep a safe distance from technology and really just try to experience the primal nature of yourself.
And connecting yourself with nature is a huge part of being a human in more ways than one. You can go to a beach and you can have a good time on the beach and whatever, but there's a deeper connection I think that nature has with us in that we are it. And by severing our connection with nature and replacing that with technology that just further takes us away from it, I think that's a big problem. But what I'm hoping is that, like you said, technologies like Neuralink, and maybe even as we were sort of touching on earlier, the the farther away we sort of get subconsciously driven from nature as a result of technology, hopefully that creates a desire and a stronger hunger in us to explore nature and explore some of these wisdom traditions and psychedelics. And again, man, the bigger psychedelics get, the more the message of the beauty of the mystery and the connection to nature and the connection to all of us as one is going to be driven home for people. And even if something bad sort of leads to something good, it's almost like the argument in the very beginning when Trump became president. People who hated Trump were saying, "Oh, Trump is going to eventually it's going to be a good thing because he's going to show us what we don't want in office." Things didn't really go according to that plan. I think have just been nuclear since then. It's just been a massive explosion of our political system in all ways from all sides. But that's neither here nor there. I guess my point being, the farther away we get from these fundamental aspects of what it means to be a human, I'm hoping drives us toward them more, or at least creates more of a hunger in us for them.
Yeah, I think that that will happen and is happening. Um, More people are, starting to meditate again. I think that's part of it. That's something that we're seeking. Um, but our connection with nature, that worries me as well because like I keep thinking about kids now. I mean, when I was a kid, I would be outside all the time in nature. We would go in the woods, we were outside until we weren't allowed to be basically. And you see kids today aren't really doing that in a lot of areas. Of course, there's exceptions. Some kids do, still go outside all the time. But there's you know, a large portion of the population of kids that mainly stay inside and they don't go out and, play with their friends as much and it's kind of evident that what this is causing, a lot of mental disorders and kids, I think they're not as socially trained or so there's just so many issues that come along with it. Um Not being outside, I mean, we need the vitamin D. During this whole COVID thing, you've seen one of the biggest correlations between people who have died from COVID was they were vitamin D deficient. And, we just take pills now. We take the vitamin D capsules and think we're going to be fine. We keep trying to replace the things that is naturally given to us. Um, Same thing with, people are now getting into this grounding where you put your bare feet onto the ground for, periods throughout the day and it's supposed to be healthy. Sun gazing, staring at the sun. Things like this. It's just nature screaming back at us, that we are it and that we have to remember that and we have to get in touch with that part of ourselves because it's showing in our health. It really is like as a culture. It's interesting. Like nowadays, we don't have a problem with people starving like we had in thousands of years up until now, hunger, famine, people starving to death was a huge problem. Now our problem is we're eating too much, we're consuming too much, and people are dying from having too much of the thing that we've been craving for thousands of years, just spending our lives searching for food. Well, now people have it and they're eating themselves to death and they're staying inside and they're not having, the proper vitamin D and getting in the sun. So these are the things that worry me about what I see as a society where we're kind of headed. Um, I think that with technology, we're going to keep trying to replace the things that nature gives us to like substitute. Like like I mentioned with like vitamin D capsules. Um if we just acknowledged the role of nature in our health and in our well, mental and physical health, and we kind of got back to that, I think we wouldn't need all these different supplements. And it seems now that there's basically a pill for everything, and we think that we can overcome our symptoms by just putting something into our body that is, supposedly a cure. But I don't think that that's the answer at all. I think that um, we have to overcome these issues on a more individual level. And I think that people can figure it out for themselves and not just take the pill that's working for everybody else.
And you mentioned mental health and just taking a pill to fix everything. And that, like, this is exactly where this chemical imbalance model comes from when it comes to anybody having mental ailments. If you suffer from depression and anxiety or any sort of mental ailment, the common theory now that is agreed upon by most medical professionals is that you have a chemical imbalance in your brain. And if we just add the perfect cocktail of pills, then that chemical imbalance will be corrected. But in reality, what's happening is millions of people are going to their doctors and they're complaining of mental illness essentially. And they're being given a medication that creates a chemical imbalance in their brain. Your brain is a perfectly working machine in terms of its neurochemistry. I mean, of course, there's going to be certain circumstances where there are defects in the system because where there is organic material, there's always defects within those systems. But for the most part, if you're introducing a psychotropic drug into your system, you are throwing off the chemical balance of your brain and creating an imbalance. And what that does is it creates lifelong patients who can't live without the medication because they don't have the background knowledge to understand that these medications are meant to be taken to get you past a certain threshold and then weaned off of, along with the knowledge of how to better yourself and better your life in a direction that's going to be positive for your mental health.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate, this narrative that is being perpetuated now when it comes to things like depression and other mental disorders, where you're being told by doctors that you have a medical problem that is, they use words like it's chemical in your brain, and they imply that it's something that needs to be remedied by a pill, or it's something that you have. Like, I have depression. And meaning I'm going to live with depression my whole life. Whereas if you take, I believe that, what you believe kind of creates your reality. If you believe that you have depression and it's a permanent thing that you need to take a pill to get rid of, that's how you're gonna live. And I don't think telling people that is helpful either. Um, rather than understanding that as a human being, you will be depressed. Not that you have depression, but at points in your life, you will feel depressed. And there are things that you can do to not feel depressed, that don't involve, changing the chemistry in your brain. I think a huge part of people's mental health is what they're putting in their bodies. If your body isn't healthy, your mind isn't healthy. That's what I've learned myself when I was overweight like 2 years ago, and I was eating bad, I was drinking, I was doing everything wrong for my body, and my mental health deteriorated so quickly. And it's interesting because once I got myself together, thanks to, psychedelics actually, I started to exercise and I started eating healthy. And as soon as my body started to heal, the mental clarity was insane. It was like night and day. I was the person who thought that I have depression, it's genetic, I have to have it, it's in my genes. I have anxiety, that's genetic too. I'm looking, up my family tree and seeing this stuff and convincing myself that it's a part of me that, will define my behavior. And I'm thinking, I went through the thought process of, okay, what what antidepressant should I go on? I never went on them, but I was having these thoughts. I was like, okay, so I think I'm going to need some type of benzo for when I have a panic attack, like a Xanax or something. Like just just thinking up cocktails in my head to try to get rid of this feeling and not realizing that I was depressed because I look in the mirror and I don't like what I see. It's as simple as that. And depression is a tool. It's a tool for you to let you know that there's something that you have to change. Um, or if depression didn't exist in people, they would just, eat themselves to death. And it's that feeling that motivates change. So I think that it's important to recognize that I'm speaking for myself that I didn't have depression. I was depressed because of a multitude of things. And a big one that I don't think people recognize enough is the diet. Um, you look at the food you're eating, and if you pick up a box of anything and look at the ingredients, you won't be able to pronounce half the stuff. So I went and made a switch to eating organic and just trying to eat everything natural and exercising. And it changed my mental state like night and day. I haven't felt depressed in such a long time, and I'm so thankful for that. And it's interesting because I have this gratitude for my mental health, and even just feeling into that gratitude makes it feel even better. Like it just feeds itself. Um, but I think a lot of people that if you're suffering from any type of mental health like disorder, I'd say ask yourself what you're eating first. Um, Start eating better, get a six pack, and then see if you're depressed. I mean, I think a lot of people wouldn't feel as depressed if they had a six pack and they were eating right and all this.
And that's not a six pack of beer. That's a six pack of belly muscles. Yeah, moving around is such a big deal. If you just get up and walk, put yourself in nature, get yourself in a position where your heart rate is increasing, where your blood is moving through your body more. It's everything along with diet. You don't have to run a mile every day or lift a bunch of weights. As long as you just kind of like move around and eat sort of healthy, that's where your journey begins. And along with the chemical imbalance theory, what you see is motivations that guide the way our culture moves when it comes to mental health and when it comes to eating is based off of profit motive. It's all profit. All the advertising that we see every single day has a larger effect on us than we really believe. I mean, ask yourself, why is Facebook free? Why is all social media free? And also, why is Mark Zuckerberg a multi-billionaire? It's because of advertising. Radio, internet, YouTube, podcasts, all these things that are free, even free to play video games now, are all based on like after consumption purchase because we are being influenced by the advertising that is surrounding us. I watched this movie recently. I think it was made in the 80s. I've watched it a few times in my life, but I watched it again recently. It's called They Live. It's like a really corny action movie where it's Rowdy Roddy Piper. He plays the main character, and essentially he finds these glasses, and they're sunglasses, and when he puts them on, he can see what all of the ads around him and all of the signage on stores and newsstands, like what they really are trying to push to you. So there's like a big sign that is like a, a sign for like a honeymoon getaway. And when he puts the glasses on, it says like obey, and all of these like different phrases that essentially say like, feed into this, consume. And these are the like subconscious, subliminal, motivating factors that are driving us to do pretty much all of the things that we do because our lives are based off of working and buying things. That's pretty much what American life is or westernized life is.
Yeah, and it's that way for almost all of us. And I, hearing you say that, it I can relate to it totally because I've felt that, kind of controlled by advertisements and the just consumption. I've felt that way for most of my life. And it's I'm just grateful that I don't feel that way right now, which I think that there is a big push in like a counterculture trying to kind of push against this. People that are recognizing it. Um what I've noticed is a total lifestyle change is needed basically to counteract this. So what what's worked for me and what I've clung on to is kind of a minimalist naturalist lifestyle. This is where I think exercise is really important too because instead of putting your time into working to get money to buy something, now a more rewarding feeling is investing your time in yourself, in your body. So, exercising, it helps with your brain chemistry, it helps you feel good, it helps you look good, and you don't have to, consume anything to start on this endeavor of exercise. And I've noticed it's way easier to be disinterested in material things when you realize how plentiful your own body is with things that can reward you. So, luckily, I kind of see through the matrix in a sense. I don't find myself wanting many things anymore. I tried to become content with what I have exactly where I am at the moment rather than looking at others and wanting what they have. And it can be hard, jealousy is such a powerful force in so many people's lives and drives them to do, almost everything they do a lot of times. I felt that way in my life. But I think expanding your consciousness and raising your level of awareness is the move to counteract those types of feelings because now I'm more aware of my body. I'm more aware of, the things outside of my body as well, like the advertisements and, the quote unquote matrix. So I think the more that you become aware of yourself, which is where meditation comes in and psychedelics, you become more aware of yourself. And then you can kind of look past the material things in life and realize the beauty that you have within and the beauty in everything around you. This is the importance of expanding consciousness and raising your awareness. Material things aren't really needed when you can look at the world in a more open-minded way. It's very interesting the change that I've had in my life over like the last year or two. Um being completely consumed by, negative energy and jealousy of others and wanting things that I don't have to now realizing that I have so much already and keeping that mindset will just bring me more.
I'm guilty of loving material goods too. I got a sweet Apple Watch. I love this microphone that I have. It's nice. But I got to a point where I'm not consumed by what I have or don't have, and I don't value my life based off of what I have or what I don't have. I just like to have cool shit, and like I'm okay with that. You know, I don't have an attachment to having it, and I don't have an attachment to not having it. So I can just sort of sit in the middle, and I can enjoy the society that I live in, which happens to be capitalistic. I can enjoy this type of society, while also being detached enough from it, to not need any of it. I think it's important to be able to enjoy what is provided for you and what you can have and what you work for, but also understanding that if you didn't have it, if that technology and all these nice things were all taken away, it wouldn't affect like my mental well-being at all, because I can exist without it. And this is a point that it was actually brought up in Meditations by Marcus Aurelius that I've been listening to. In the beginning of book one, he starts to talk about all the people he appreciates, so the people that are in his life that he's learned from and things like that. And the one person he's talking about, he describes this exact scenario where, you are able to enjoy the abundance of life, but you don't define yourself based off of it. And if you know that when you lose all of it, or if you lose all of it, that you can still be content within yourself, that's so important.
Yeah, and that kinda reminded me of the Buddha when you said that, because the Buddha had it all. He had everything, and it took him getting rid of it, like, leaving his life of, wealth to really discover what it is to be happy. And I think that that might be the case for a lot of people, because 'cause we're talking about technology and all this stuff, and there's a lot of, benefits from it. The information that we have access to is just incredible, but I feel like the way that a lot of people are using technology is actually leading to these negative mental health effects. Like, when you look to kids using social media, it leads to a lot of depression and teen suicide and all these horrible things. And it's interesting to watch because this technology is so new, we don't really know how to handle it yet. And it seems like our technology is moving faster than our growth as human beings. Like, our consciousness needs to rise to match the level of technology we're dealing with. Because if you put this technology in the hands of, say, the Buddha or somebody that is enlightened, who knows what can be done with it. But when you put this technology in the hands of people who are, consumed with material items and consumed with themselves and already depressed, it seems like it will just add to those feelings.
Well, the thing is, it's our responsibility as humans to learn how to use our technology responsibly. We have this weird notion within our society that like everything is going to be okay, man, because you know, mother president and mother country and mother Apple and mother Samsung, they're all going to take care of us. They're all going to give us everything we need, and we don't have to work very hard for it. It's because it's all going to be given to us. And I think that's a really detrimental attitude to have, because you're learning to become dependent on things that are sort of transient and will dissolve right in front of your eyes in 2 seconds. Imagine what would happen if the American electrical grid went down, or even if just the internet went down. We would be fucked. A lot of the world would be in a lot of trouble because we've become so dependent on our technology in a way that we're not using it responsibly. We're not using it to enhance our baseline like level of wisdom and life. We're using it as a crutch, as a tool to replace, like we were saying earlier, to replace the things that nature gives us and the things that we give ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, if electricity went out, if the grid got fried, I mean, in a week you would see society start falling apart. Um, yeah, it's interesting. how reliant we've become on things that are outside of our control.
One thing we talk quite a bit about on here is whether or not consciousness is fundamental. And I mean, it's an age old argument that, we could have for eons, but it seems that the culture that we live in right now pushes the space time model as being fundamental. And to me, what that says is that the inner world is not real, but the outer world, the material, physical world, is real. And that definitely coincides with what we were just talking about with materialism, with advertising, with purchasing, with consumerism, with all of this. So it's no surprise to me that the pervasive model in our culture is the physicalist paradigm that says space time is fundamental. All the things outside here, this is real. All the things inside your brain, not so much.
Yeah, it's like a perfect storm. We were indoctrinated with this worldview from such a young age, um, that it's no longer become just like a worldview to us. It's what reality is. And up until recent years, that's the way I took it. I thought that we had it figured out as a species. They were like, this is what it is. And it wasn't something that I even questioned. This was my reality. It's a physical reality, and like you said, external real, internal not so real. It's interesting to watch because it's like you see that one idea and you watch it grow into the culture that we have now. And you could trace it back and it makes total sense. It makes me wonder what it might look like if a society had, the opposite view. Not saying either is even right or wrong, but what kind of society that would breed. If we were indoctrinated with a viewpoint that the physical world is nothing but an idea, and, the whole idealism that, mind is the fundamental aspect of reality, the substance of reality being mind. And when you think about that, the culture that would breed would be pretty wild, I think.
I was listening to a podcast today with Lex Friedman and Annika Harris, and Annika Harris brought this up, but she said that it seems that it might be legitimate to say that we started from the correct paradigm in order to discover the new paradigm of consciousness being fundamental. Because, like you said, if you think about where we would be right now if we started with the consciousness being fundamental uh, view of reality, who knows where we would be? But if you look at it right now, you can see the negative effects on people that this type of society is having. And you can see people being driven more and more toward going inside, going to retreats and all this stuff. Psychedelics becoming so huge, and all of this spirituality and inner reflection becoming so much more prominent in our lives. You can see it, and I think it is caused by all of the depression, all the anxiety, all the bullshit that this physicalist paradigm has given us. So I think maybe starting from the position that we're in, it might be like the best way to go because we're able to sort of slowly discover something that is like fundamentally under like the foundation.
It makes me wonder um if ancient cultures in the past had already went through this and have known this before. Because if you look at like ancient Egypt, or better yet, just if a culture did have the worldview of consciousness being fundamental, you wouldn't need so much material items and things. This one guy that I've listened to, Matthias DeStefano, he was on Aubrey Marcus's podcast, and this is a man that claims to remember his past lives and things like this. And a lot of the things he says resonates with me. And what he said about Chem, which would be like ancient Egypt right before what we consider the old kingdom, I think, like right after the flood. so about like 12,000 years ago, that they were living in a totally different paradigm, not what we're living in now. And I think that according to his memories, that they may have had a completely different understanding of reality, and they had technology, but their technology wasn't external like we think of technology today. He said that they viewed themselves as the technology and they mastered mind, and that allowed them to do incredible things. And with this, they lived in a whole different paradigm. And it makes you think, what is possible if the collective consciousness believes in consciousness being fundamental? If we were indoctrinated into that mode of thinking, and we thought of ourselves as the technology rather than externally building the technology, what type of things human beings would be capable of? Um, maybe, I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of things could be possible. I've experienced so much wild shit in the last couple of years, from psychedelic trips to breath work, meditation, and especially in dream states as well. It just makes me think that, the power of your mind is key. Consciousness is key to understanding reality. And it's interesting that, our current model of reality, the materialist, physicalist model, um, we've been driving at this thing for so long in our culture, and like our science has kind of hit a dead end with it. Um, and that's why I think with Donald Hoffman saying that space time is doomed, that's what he says, right?
Mhm.
I think that's true. So it's interesting that when you look at our scientists today, materialist scientists, they call consciousness, it's referred to as the hard problem of consciousness. It's something that has been ignored for hundreds of years in Western culture. It's been ignored and just looked at as a problem, which is crazy when, in my view, and that it's the main thing to be looked at rather than just pushing it aside and saying, "Ah, we'll work that out later. It's not important." That's everything works aside from the consciousness aspect of it. I think it's interesting because it's gotta be looked at intensively rather than pushed to the side and considered a problem.
And you ask, what would a culture be like if they started from a consciousness, inner work type of mentality, as opposed to a physicalist one? And look no further than the Amazon. You have cultures that are indigenous now, that are and have been for the past 1,000 or more years, mapping the conscious world and the world of mind, while we were over here working with bombs and airplanes and material stuff. They were mapping the world that we're going to have to eventually adopt into our lives. And if you ask them down in the Amazon, especially the Shipibo tribes, the ayahuasca shaman who traverse, the realms of infinity, they'll tell you what our problem is. It's pretty much what we've been saying this entire podcast, which is that we've been blinded and hypnotized by material goods. We have severed our connection to nature and to ourselves. And they would also say that if we don't get our act together, that we're going to quote unquote bring the whole house of cards down on the entire planet. And man, America, China, Russia, like we're flirting with nuclear war. Like, what is happening here? Like, we really are about to blow up, or bring down the entire house of cards on everyone.
Yep, and that might be what has to happen. We might need another great reset. I mean, whatever happens is what needs to happen? Um But it makes me think when you mentioned the Amazon, so do you think that they have it, quote, unquote, "right"?
I don't think anyone has it right. I think humans were the only thing we can have right is the direction in which we're moving. You know, I do think that there is sort of like it might not be so two-sided as to say one direction's wrong, one direction is right, but you can definitely see and sense what is a more fruitful direction for society, for nature, for symbiotic living, happiness, joy, fulfillment. And you can also see a side where that's not so much valued. And those types of things are pushed to the side in favor of constant consumerism, hating the other group, creating out groups to not associate yourself with in order to give context to your own shallow views of what you think reality and society should be. And that's something that psychedelics really helped to teach me was that you need all of the people, you need everything. The more perspectives you have, as a society, or you know what, let's say as a species, the more perspectives that we have surrounding us only informs and strengthens our own perspective because it gives it more context to exist within, which is a it gives it a broader range of information to cover. If I am surrounded by people who have either my view or just one opposing view that's opposite, then all I'm doing is I'm creating a context for negativity uh, that's based in me hating the other side. And what that does is it just makes my position more volatile. It makes it it makes it farther on the spectrum to one side as opposed to understanding and being complacent with the middle path. And I just think that's not good for anyone's perspective. I think we need to broaden uh, our ideas of what other perspectives can offer us.
That's why, it's important to hold the perspective of no perspective almost, or not no perspective, but it's interesting because as people, it seems that we identify with that perspective. That's where you get these, tribal groups attacking each other. I found it important to raise my awareness, my self awareness, so I can understand what I truly am, that I am not the perspective. I'm not, I can't identify with that. So a lot of people, what I see them doing is taking on an ideology and then identifying themselves with it. So if you attack the idea, they think that you're attacking them. So what I've been trying to do is kind of just respect everybody's perspective and try to absorb it, but not identify with it. So not, claim it as my own, but bring it into myself and understand it. Um and I think that's an important thing for people to do. I feel like the more you become aware of yourself and your true nature, the easier it is to do that. And then as a species, we could be aligned with that perspective of no perspective and kind of work toward a common goal rather than, fighting amongst each other so much. I think the key is love, man. And it really is though. Um Actual love, selflessness. We're so self-absorbed and we don't even know what we are. We don't know who we are. So it's going to cause problems, of course. But if more people, and myself obviously included, what I'm trying to do is kind of become that selfless ideal. Um and try to put others before yourself, not because it'll make you feel good, but because they are yourself, if that makes sense. To recognize yourself as one with everything, not just every person, but everything, every idea, every perspective. Recognize yourself with that and not cling to an ideology. Um, I think that would be interesting to see if a whole culture could kind of adopt that mode of thinking and see what it leads to kind of bring it all together, have that idea of consciousness being fundamental, and instead of working towards consumerism, money, and all these things, focus on yourself, on self-awareness, on looking at yourself as the technology and everyone around you as yourself. Um, I don't know, I think it would be interesting to see what kind of fruits would come from that type of idea.
Amen, brother. Is in terms of directionality, like we were talking about before, that seems to be in what I would say is like the right direction. You know, we might not have the map perfectly. We might not know exactly what we're supposed to do and say, I'm doing the right thing, but at least the direction seems to be positive because it's based off of things that, again, we go back to what we were talking about earlier. These ideas that you're speaking on are based off of the the foundation of the human condition, which is where all of these wisdom texts cover.
And it's kind of hard to talk about this stuff because a lot of it contradicts itself in a way. Because we're talking about not necessarily how we think people should act, but it kind of comes off that way. But see, that's why for me, I'm kind of like a radical individualist because I don't think there's any way that you can create a system that will be perfect and like one system for all these people to follow. I don't think that works. So in my belief, if all I can do, all I'll ever be able to do is go within myself and learn from myself, learn more about what I actually am and what reality really is. And I think that's all you can do and then hope that others are doing something similar. Um and then let everything fall where it may. Uh But as far as setting up a system and telling people, I think that's one of the big issues. Telling people things never really works. It has to be self-discovered. So if that's how it works with me at least. I don't respond well to like authority or someone telling me the way it is. I want to discover it for myself and then I can own it as myself. I'm not a fan of like just faith-based beliefs or appealing to authority. I think that when you truly discover something on your own and you you had the responsibility of finding it yourself, then you can really own it and live it. You could be the thing rather than just because even if it's something you're just told, even if you think you fully believe it, there's still some subconscious part of you that knows you aren't it, that you didn't fully discover that and know it as all truth. So I think the key, in my opinion, would be raise consciousness. That's basically it. The more aware you've become, especially of yourself, the more selfless you can become. And then, my opinion, would minimize violence and hopefully we wouldn't blow up the planet like it looks like we're doing now.
Yeah, it seems that when you put all of the answers in a system and you look to that system to be your caretaker, then again, like you said, it's only going to end in demise because systems themselves inherently just can't get this right. I think that's the most true thing ever. And it's one of our biggest problems because look at our world. I mean, we think about the earth in terms of the lines on the map. We don't think of the earth as like the Gaian mind, the home of all human and animal and plant and fungal life. We we base even the physical world that we look at. on the map. And the map is based off of basically just cultural territories. That's all it is. And each of these cultural territories think that they're doing things the right way and have their own issues with the way that the other cultural territories are doing things. So you can just see inherently this is just a system that doesn't work. And I mean, it brings to mind like the conspiracy of like a one world government, and but even that is a system. And when you look to a system to dictate what you do and what your values are and who you are, you're not gonna find anything.
And it just seems that we've been indoctrinated into this way of thinking, of this very systems way of thinking. Like, we've been prioritizing the left side of the brain, the logical thinking, and kind of pushing aside the intuition and the feeling aspect of ourselves. Um, Especially just us in, Western culture, we look at things in such a strange way that we believe to be true, like the way reality is, but it's really just the way we were taught. Like when you were just talking there, I can envision in my head like what the world looks like, and I can see the lines on the map, and I can see the different areas, and then all the things that my mind attaches to those areas. And it's very, like, systematic, and it's really not true either, a lot of things when you really start to break it down and really analyze the thoughts. But it's just I think that what I found worked for me is kinda deprogramming my mind and trying to work out a new way of thinking, a way of thinking that I design rather than one that was given to me. And I think that more people doing that would lead to more happiness, I guess you'd say. I don't wanna say a better society because I don't know what it takes to make a proper society, but people are feeling unfulfilled, and, there's a lot of these mental health issues, and I think it's a lot deeper than even what we mentioned, just diet and exercise and these type of thing. I think it could boil down to a very fundamental part of ourselves where we're living in a reality and a lot of us aren't even questioning it, and the things that we believe to be true about it, we didn't discover ourselves. There's like a need for discovery, and like deep inside that, the mystery of life and the mystery of existence, it like burns inside of everyone, I think. And it's kind of just been dampered and put out because we've been given the answers, and adopted those answers and identified with them. And it's just a paradigm shifting moment when you come to realize that those answers that you were given aren't actually it. It's not actually the truth. It's just a way of thinking that, you've adopted. And it's a fun process to try to invent your own way of looking at things and your own way of thinking. Um and now I look at the world through different eyes, completely different eyes than the way I used to see things. And it's easy to I've noticed that you could feel even a little cynical or get some negative feelings from this, but I feel less cynical than I used to. And I've recognized that a lot of my dissatisfaction and anger and sadness really came from living in a reality that I was told is one way, and now kind of discovering that it was never that way to begin with. Um, and it is what you make it, basically.
And what seems to happen when you feel into that type of philosophy of life is things get a little less anxious, and you realize that in a sense everything is going to be okay. In the system that we currently live under, we're under constant stress and constant anxiety, and it's like a constant state of like being under attack, it feels like. And that's what I felt for my whole life until I started down what seems to me to be the right path, this middle way or something like that. And One of the things I learned from psychedelics that was always so prominent was this overwhelming feeling that like it's okay. Everything is going to be okay. Terrence McKenna has this awesome quote where he says, like the plants are in charge, and they really do give that vibe when you're under the influence of mushrooms specifically that, you know, don't worry. Like we got everything under control. Like you're doing okay. You're doing just fine. Just relax. Everything's gonna be all right.
And yeah, you say like relieving anxiety. It's a huge thing for me with, you know, this new way of thinking and through the help of psychedelics. It's like in our culture, we have such a fear of death. Like it's so huge. And when you really sit and think about it, it's funny because we largely let our fear of death run our lives, and we don't even know what death is as a culture. It's like we don't, we kind of just fear it. With psychedelics, that allowed me to change my view on death too, and that is one of the main things that alleviated a lot of my anxiety. Because I don't know about you, but for me, I was one of those people that would think about death too much, I think. Um, and it just caused anxiety in myself, just the thought of dying. And with my worldview at that time, dying seemed like horrible because in my mind, I was living in a physical reality. There was nothing that's going to happen. How could nothing happen? Like, it just would lead me down a spiral of just negativity and fear. And then, I take a psychedelic and I'm still that person that had those thoughts. So under the psychedelic trip, I go right to death, and then you're faced with a journey, and you have to go through the process of death, and you can fight it and live in that fear while you're in your psychedelic trip. And I've learned, the hard way, but the best way to surrender to the fear and surrender to death. And in those experiences, I've learned that death isn't at all what I thought it was, and it's beyond, language or beyond what we can talk about here. Um, that it isn't something that has to be feared, though. Um, Psychedelics revealed so much to me about what life and death is, and what my experience is going through it. So that helped with 99% of my anxiety that I used to deal with. And now I don't really have that same anxiousness.
Think about what death means in our society. Like you said, it recontextualized or redefined death for you. What death means to most people is like, I'm not going to get to see like the next season of the show I want, or like, uh, I'm not going to see the people that I love. I'm not going to be able to eat food anymore. I'm not going to be able to enjoy TV. I'm not going to get to see where technology goes. I'm not going to get to see who the next president's going to be. It's all based off of these external things because we define uh, the ceasing of living as the ceasing of existing in our external reality because that's the only reality we think exists. But when you have an experience that shows you that there's something there beneath the surface, something that exists beyond what you consider the physical world, then you can recontextualize and reappreciate what death can potentially mean. And it doesn't alleviate the fear completely because I am still afraid of death. I still have that survival mode in me that would do most anything to not die. But the baseline fear that you're speaking of death, this existential angst and anxiety that we have revolving around death, is now greatly diminished. And that doesn't just go for my death, it goes for the death of the people around me and the things around me. Again, it's like it's this basic Buddhist teaching of attachment, and attachment causes suffering. And if you can alleviate yourself of attachment, then you can begin down what they call the eightfold path, which is what alleviates your attachment to things, which will alleviate your suffering.
Yeah, and I mean, as a human being, I obviously do have fear of death, but not in the anxious way that I used to have it. Like if somebody came here and was going to kill me, I would do everything I could to defend myself and whatnot. It's not like I walk around floating on a cloud, not caring at all what happens. It's more like um there were so many unanswered questions about death. There was so much association with like sadness, being alone, fear, pain, darkness, all those things I associate with death. And then I had an experience that could change that all in an infinite moment. Like you mentioned how we everything we see or everything we think is based off of this external reality, but then have an experience where you're plucked out of that place, but you're still there at the same time, interestingly enough. But you're plucked out of an area and now you're existing in a place with no time, no space. You're just purely being. It's an infinite moment. It's like the eternity of the present. And then when you can see existence through that lens, you can realize that every end is also a beginning. Time doesn't exist in a linear fashion. Like you think of the way we conventionally think of time, you think of like one dot at the left end, one dot at the right end, and a line going through them and they meet. So just one horizontal line. And I would say that it's more accurately a circle. So there's one point at the top, and that's the beginning and the end. So time is always existing, and there's no end point or no like beginning. It's one circle, and it's all happening at that same time. So I don't have the feeling of dread when I think of, an experience of death. I think that it might be and most likely will be a very beautiful rebirth in a sense. Um, and at least for a moment, probably getting an experience of your true self and what, like Ram Dass said, it's like taking off a tight shoe. And I think that makes a lot of sense to me now. And I have to thank psychedelics for that because if it weren't for my psychedelic experiences and I was listening to somebody saying all this right now, I would be thinking, yeah, that's all nice and good, but fuck death. I'm still terrified. And I don't think there's any way to get over that. At least there wasn't for me until I had these experiences of like transcendental states, um, experiencing myself outside of time and space and in a whole different reality. It really it really assures you 1000% that there's far more to reality and existence than what we've been taught and what we just believe based on this realm.